In 1325, a 21-year-old law student from Morocco said goodbye to his mother and father and walked out of his hometown of Tangier. He was going to Mecca for the Hajj pilgrimage, a journey of about 3,000 miles. He expected to be gone for a year or two. He did not return home for 29 years. By the time Ibn Battuta finally came back to Morocco, he had traveled 75,000 miles across the known world. He had visited what we now call 44 countries. He had crossed the Sahara Desert, sailed the Indian Ocean, walked through the Russian steppes in winter, visited the Sultan of Mali, dined with the Emperor of China, and survived pirates, plagues, shipwrecks, and attempted executions. Marco Polo, the man every schoolchild learns about, traveled 15,000 miles. Ibn Battuta traveled 5 times further. He documented everything in extraordinary detail, and almost nobody in the Western world knows his name. This is the story of the greatest traveler who ever lived. Ibn Battuta was born in 1304 in Tangier, Morocco, into a family of Islamic legal scholars. He was educated in the Quran, law, and Arabic literature. He was by all accounts a serious and devout young man with an extraordinary curiosity about the world. In June 1325, at the age of 21, he set out alone on his first Hajj pilgrimage to Mecca. In his own words, he wrote, "I set out alone, having neither the company of a fellow traveler in whose companionship I might find cheer, nor a caravan whose party I might join. Swayed by an overmastering impulse within me and a desire long cherished in my bosom to visit these illustrious sanctuaries, I resolved to quit all my dear ones and abandon my home as birds abandon their nests." He was 21 years old. He was traveling alone. And he had absolutely no idea that he would not see his family again for nearly 3 decades. The road to Mecca took him east through Algeria and Tunisia. He joined a caravan of pilgrims. Along the way, he stopped in cities, sat with scholars, ate with merchants, listened to stories of distant lands. Something was happening to him that he could not explain. Every city he arrived in made him want to see the next one. Every scholar he met told him about somewhere he had not yet been. The world was so much larger than Tangier, and he needed to see all of it. By the time he reached Egypt, he had already decided he was not going straight home. Cairo in 1326 stopped Ibn Battuta in his tracks. He had never seen anything like it. He wrote that it was a city that surpasses all other cities in beauty and grandeur. The population was over 500,000 people. It was the largest city in the world outside China. He spent months there, studying, learning, meeting scholars. He was developing a habit that would define his entire life. Wherever he went, he sought out the greatest minds, the most powerful rulers, and the most devout holy men. He collected people the way others collect objects. In Cairo, he heard about a great Muslim holy man in Jerusalem. He went. In Jerusalem, he heard about scholars in Damascus. He went. In Damascus, he heard about the holy cities of Iraq. He went. He finally reached Mecca. He completed his Hajj. And then instead of turning around and going home to Morocco, he made a decision that would change his life and our understanding of the medieval world forever. He decided to go to Iraq and Persia, and then maybe India, just to see. He made a promise to himself that he would never travel the same road twice. If there was another way to get somewhere, he would always take it. That one promise meant that for the next 29 years, he would always be going somewhere new. As the ship carrying all his belongings, his books, his gifts for the Sultan of India sank beneath the waves. Everything he had accumulated over 9 years of travel was gone in minutes. He arrived in India penniless. He had letters of recommendation for the Sultan Muhammad bin Tughlaq in Delhi, one of the most powerful and most unpredictable rulers in the world. Ibn Battuta would spend 8 years in his court. The Sultan was brilliant and terrifying in equal measure. He rewarded generously and punished savagely. Ibn Battuta watched men executed for minor offenses. He himself came under suspicion multiple times. On one occasion, he was placed under house arrest for several months. He spent that time fasting and reading the Quran, convinced he was going to be killed. He was not killed. He was given a job. The Sultan appointed him chief judge of Delhi. Ibn Battuta, the wandering Moroccan traveler, was now running the legal system of one of the most powerful empires in Asia. But he could not stay still. He never could. In 1341, the Sultan sent him as an ambassador to China. Ibn Battuta set sail with an enormous diplomatic fleet. Storms wrecked the ships. His companions drowned. The gifts for the Chinese emperor were lost at sea. He survived by swimming to shore. He had lost everything. Again. But the losses and the near deaths never stopped him, because the things he was seeing were beyond anything any human being from his world had ever witnessed or recorded. In Mali, he sat with Mansa Musa's successor and documented the wealth and sophistication of the empire in extraordinary detail. He was not impressed by everything. He was openly critical of customs he found strange. But he recorded everything with extraordinary honesty and precision. In Constantinople, then still a Christian city, he was received by the Byzantine emperor. He documented the great Hagia Sophia in detail, writing about its gold mosaics and overwhelming scale with the eye of someone who had seen hundreds of great buildings, but recognized something truly extraordinary. In the Maldive Islands, he was appointed as a judge and accidentally became entangled in local politics, married several times, had children, and eventually had to flee in the middle of the night. In China, he visited Beijing and documented the incredible infrastructure of the Yuan dynasty. The roads, the postal system, the paper money, the sheer scale of cities that made even Cairo look small. He documented the Black Death spreading across Central Asia and the Middle East in real time. He was one of the first people to record its devastating progress across multiple countries. His account is one of the most important historical documents of the 14th century plague. By 1349, Ibn Battuta was finally heading home. He was 45 years old. He had been traveling for 24 years. He had crossed the Sahara one more time, visited the great trading cities of West Africa, and documented civilizations that Europe would not discover for another 150 years. When he finally arrived back in Morocco, the world had changed completely. His parents were dead. Friends he had grown up with were gone. The Black Death had devastated the cities he remembered from childhood. Morocco was not the place he had left, and he was not the man who had left it. But he was not done yet. He made one more journey across the Sahara to the Mali Empire, documenting the wealth and complexity of sub-Saharan African civilization in detail that historians still rely on today. When he finally returned for the last time, the Sultan of Morocco summoned him and asked him to dictate his travels to a court scholar named Ibn Juzai. The result was the Rihla, the Book of Journeys. Ibn Battuta sat and talked. Ibn Juzai wrote it all down. The result was one of the most extraordinary documents in human history. A first-hand account of the medieval world across 3 continents, written by a man who had actually been everywhere he described. The Rihla was largely ignored by the Western world for 500 years. It was not translated into English until 1829. By then, Columbus, Vasco da Gama, and Magellan had all been crowned as the great explorers of history. The Moroccan who had beaten them all by 200 years was a footnote if he appeared at all. Today, historians understand what he actually accomplished. Ibn Battuta's Rihla is the single most detailed account of the medieval world that exists. He documented cities, rulers, customs, trade routes, plagues, religious practices, and daily life across 44 countries with a consistency and accuracy that has been verified by modern archaeology and scholarship again and again. He documented the Mali Empire at its peak before any European had ever heard of it. He recorded the Byzantine Empire in its final century before the Ottoman conquest. He described the Mongol successor states of Central Asia, the Swahili coast of East Africa, the complexity of Indian Ocean trade, the sophistication of Chinese infrastructure, all of it firsthand, all of it real. Marco Polo is a household name. Ibn Battuta is not. Marco Polo traveled 15,000 miles, and his account is filled with stories historians cannot verify. Ibn Battuta traveled 75,000 miles, and his account has been verified in extraordinary detail. The greatest explorer in human history was a 21-year-old Muslim law student from Morocco who just wanted to go to Mecca and could not stop walking. His name was Abu Abdullah Muhammad ibn Battuta, and the world he saw with his own eyes 700 years ago is still the most complete picture of the medieval world that we have. Some people are just born to see everything.